Ju-Han is a low-rank hunter who was tricked into taking on a mission he couldn't possibly survive by a man named Taejun Kwon, and now he finds himself faced with his team having been absolutely massacred by a giant snake monster, and he's next on the menu. To his credit, he does put up a really good fight against that thing, but his strength just isn't good enough because his sword snaps, and despite his best efforts to avoid getting eaten, he still ends up getting his legs chewed on by the snake monster, and at that point, he knew it was over for him. He somehow manages to crawl away from the snake's grasp and attempts to pick up his broken sword so he can keep fighting, but the snake gets back up first, and it is about to finish him off. Just before the snake bites off his head, it suddenly freezes in place right in front of him, almost as if time has stopped altogether. Ju-Hyun then hears a voice ring out in his head, and it is making fun of his desperate situation because no matter what he chooses to do here, he's going to end up dying. Ju-Hyun recognizes the voice as that of an artifact and begs it to help him get rid of the snake monster. But the voice tells him they won't do him any good because his legs have already been chewed off, and he's losing a lot of blood, so he's not going to survive much longer. And even if he did somehow manage to stop the bleeding, how exactly does he intend to get out of this tomb? Because he certainly won't be walking. It says it's a pity that someone with so much untapped potential would end up dying in a place like this. But Ju-Hyun says he didn't end up like this because he wanted to. And as he thinks back on his life, the only thing on his mind is how he wants to get back at Taejun Kwon for doing this to him. Seeing Ju-Hyun so full of rage and a thirst for vengeance even though he's at death's door amuses the artifact. So it decides it might be worth helping him after all and agrees to lend him its power, revealing its true form as a crow. It tells him to claim the throne of the true king if he thinks he is capable of such a feat, and after that, it flies straight into Ju-Hyun's body. The next thing Ju-Hyun knows, he's sitting in a police station, and one of the first things he notices is that his legs are back somehow, which is really confusing to him. But not as confusing as the fact that he isn't in the tomb anymore. He's still wondering what's going on when the police officer sitting in front of him tells him to sit down and hurry up and answer his questions because they want to clock out in time for the New Year's party. Hearing that, Ju-Hyun looks over at the calendar, and to his shock, it says the year is 2025. But that can't be right because, from what he remembers, 2025 was 15 years ago. He starts wondering if it's really possible that he was sent back in time, but just then, a woman gets in his face and starts yelling at him for wasting their time here. Ju-Hyun feels like he remembers her face from somewhere, and when he looks over and spots her son with a wide grin on his face, he finally remembers what this is about. The kid basically tried to rage bait him into a fight, and before Ju-Hyun could even do anything, the kid fell to the ground and pretended he was hit. And after that, the kid's mother dragged him to the police station for it. Ju-Hyun tries to recall how this situation was resolved last time, and he remembers how the mother basically demanded an outrageous settlement amount, and he was forced to get on his knees and beg for forgiveness, just so she would reduce the amount because, back then, he had absolutely no money. The mother is starting to get impatient since Ju-Hyun has been staring off into space for a while now, so she raises her hand and is about to slap him, but all of a sudden, Ju-Hyun's years of intense combat training kick in at the threat of bodily harm, and he proceeds to catch her arm before she hits him. This shocks everyone there, including him, since he didn't think his body would be able to move this fast at this point in time. But moving on from that, he yells at her and tells her to give it a rest already, because they all know her son is the one who started that fight, yet she's here demanding such outrageous compensation for that spoiled brat. The boy hears Ju-Hyun call him a spoiled brat and gets mad, so he lunges at him, but Ju-Hyun's skills kick in again, and before the boy can punch him, he proceeds to judo flip the kid onto the ground. Doing that definitively confirms to Ju-Hyun that he has retained all the combat skills he built up over the years, and if everything goes the same way it did last time, he should be able to finally turn things around for himself. However, a moment later, he snaps back to reality and realizes that he just flipped the kid in the middle of a police station, so he's definitely getting in trouble for this. A few minutes later, Ju-Hyun is locked in a jail cell while the mother screams about him hitting her son, and he could have argued self-defense to avoid getting locked up, but he honestly doesn't care since, in a few days, once the relics appear, the world is going to become a lawless wasteland anyway, so a criminal record won't mean much. Besides, compared to everything he went through in his previous life, spending a few hours in a jail cell is practically nothing. From what Ju-Hyun remembers, this year, violent earthquakes will begin happening all across the globe, and structures called tombs will emerge, and those tombs will contain artifacts that possess immense power, and as a result, people from all across the world ventured into the tombs in search of those relics. As luck would have it, Ju-Hyun was one of those people, and he managed to stumble across a relic in a tomb after tons of effort and hard work. and he thought it was going to be his ticket to a good life since excavating relics was very lucrative. But he should have known that it wouldn't be that easy because, not long after that, big corporations began to monopolize the dungeons, making it so that no one aside from them could gain access to relics, and then they'd sell those relics for millions at auction. At first, people tried to fight back against the corporations because it wasn't fair that they had excluded everyone else from the tombs, but with the military firepower they had at their disposal, no one was able to defy them. The governments weren't able to stop them either because relics had already become too valuable to ignore, and anyone with enough power wanted control over them. For most people, this was where their tomb raiding dreams ended, but Zhu Hian was an exception because, thanks to his exceptional tomb raiding skills, he was scouted by a man named Taejun Quan, the chairman of TKBM, a large dungeon monopolizer, and as a result, he was allowed to continue tomb raiding, but he was also forced to handle all of Taejun's dirty work, smuggling, stealing, and killing for relics, all just to line Taejun's pockets, and the only reason he put up with it was because he thought that was his only chance to have a better life. However, in the end, he was unfortunate enough to end up falling into a trap in the last tomb he raided. He doesn't want to let that happen again, so he needs to prepare himself to take full advantage of the tombs while he still can. However, that's a lot easier said than done because, while he may have his memories and combat skills from his past life, that alone won't be enough. He needs to get ready to start excavating as soon as possible, but he has no idea how to do that as he is now. Just then, Zhu Hian sees a set of glowing lights right in front of his face, and at first, he thinks he must be hallucinating, but then the light changes shape and calls him a thief who can barely hold a shovel. Zhu Hian realizes that this must be the work of a relic, and he assumes it must be that crow he met just before he died, so he gets up and yells at it to show itself and stop hiding. However, nothing appears after he says all that, and the only thing that changes is that his system panel now shows a progress bar, telling him that he is 1/4 of the way to unlocking a spy skill. The mission says he is now able to detect everything around him within a 1-meter radius. Zhu Hian still thinks that Crow is behind this status screen, and he tells it to stop treating his life like a game, but then the screen changes to tell him he needs to unlock all 4 basic skills that all Tomb Raiders need. Zhu Hian realizes he is the only one who can see the panel, and now that he really pays attention, he realizes that he really can see everything within a 1-meter radius crystal clear. Even the smallest details around him stand out in a way they never did before, making it obvious that this ability is already taking effect. He remembers that this was one of the abilities that he gained from the archaeologist relic he found in his last life, and although the relic is gone, it looks like the ability still remains, somehow. And since it says he is only 1/4 of the way through the mission, that must mean there are 3 other skills left for him to unlock. Just then, someone comes to get him from the cell, and it turns out to be Jianwu, a detective that Zhu Hian was friends with back then. Jianwu heard about what happened, and he was able to get Zhu Hian released by proving that the kid was a serial scam artist who baits people into fights all the time and demands a settlement afterward. Jianwu was one of the few people who actually looked out for Zhu Hian till the end, so Zhu Hian is really glad to see him again after his past life of hardship. As Jianwu and Zhu Hian are walking back from the station, Zhu Hian asks Jianwu if he has heard about anything strange happening lately. Jianwu has no idea what he's talking about and tells him he'd be better off asking a fortune teller about that sort of thing, and with that kind of answer, Zhu Hian can confirm that relic users really haven't appeared yet. After that, Zhu Hian says goodbye to Jianwu for the night, and he assumes that the tombs must have already started appearing like last time, but people simply haven't found out about them yet. And if that really is the case, then this is the perfect time for him to make his move. Every minute that passes is another chance for someone else to discover one of those tombs first, so he can't afford to waste any time. However, he still has one major problem: money. Most of the early relics are in Europe and America, so he needs to raise enough money for a plane ticket, and he's thinking about how to get the money for it. But all of a sudden, as he is turning into a back alley to get home, he runs into Park, one of the people who has been tormenting him at his part-time job. Back then, Zhu Hian desperately needed money, so he was forced to work at an art gallery owned by Park's sister, and he and his buddies made sure to make his life there a living nightmare any chance they got. Right now, they intend to beat Zhu Hian up for fun just because they can, but they have no idea that Zhu Hian isn't the same spineless weakling he was in his last life. One of them raises his hand to smack Zhu Hian in the face, but Zhu Hian beats him to the punch and smacks the guy so hard he falls to the ground. Park can't believe Zhu Hian would actually dare to fight back, so he runs at him, intending to teach him a lesson. However, Park gets the wind punched out of him, and then Zhu Hian knees him in the face for good measure. The others are starting to wonder how Zhu Hian became so good at fighting, but they assume there is no way he can beat all of them if they rush him at the same time. However, they were sorely mistaken because Joo-hyun proceeds to wipe the floor with them, all without so much as breaking a sweat. Park is so enraged that he pulls a knife on Joo-hyun, and the others try to calm him down since, yeah, they wanted to beat Joo-hyun up, but it's going to be bad if they really end up killing him. However, Park is too angry to care right now. Joo-hyun isn't so worried about Park pulling a knife on him since he is skilled enough to handle that, but what he is worried about is the fact that the knife he is holding is an artifact, and he has no idea how Park got his hands on it, especially since he has no idea that it's a relic. It's possible that a few relics slipped out into human society naturally, and that's something he's going to have to watch out for going forward. But right now, since it's just Park holding the knife, there's nothing for him to be worried about because stealing it from him is going to be a piece of cake. Park lunges at Joo-hyun and tries to slash him, but Joo-hyun masterfully dodges all his attacks and disarms him in less than 10 seconds, and now that he has the knife in his possession, he decides to show these goons what a relic can really do. As he activates the knife, it enhances his body, allowing him to see all the weak points of his opponents as well as boosting his speed and agility, and with that boost, he is able to rush forward and slash Park's goons multiple times without either of them getting the chance to react. Of course, he made sure to avoid hitting any vital organs since he didn't want to kill them, but the fact that Joo-hyun was actually willing to stab them scares the group so much that they are no longer willing to fight. However, Joo-hyun isn't about to let them get off that easily, so he outright robs them. A little while later, Park calls his sister to tell her about what happened, but she finds it hard to believe that Joo-hyun would be capable of beating 3 people up all on his own and robbing them afterwards. Park starts telling her about all the weird stuff Joo-hyun did, including how he started moving way faster after stealing the knife for some reason, but she isn't really interested in the details and just asks Park how much Joo-hyun managed to steal from him. Park tells her that Joo-hyun stole all the money in his account, along with the knife and Buddha statue he had on him, and his sister doesn't really care about all that other stuff, but she freaks out when she hears that Joo-hyun took the Buddha statue because that thing was really important, and she yells at Park to go find a way to get it back. The following morning, Joo-hyun heads over to a pawn shop to sell the Buddha statue, but to his disappointment, he finds out that it's basically a piece of cheap junk, so it isn't worth much. He is starting to wonder why Park was carrying around something as useless as this, but just then, his system panel opens up and activates his spy skill, allowing him to analyze the statue and discover that there is something hidden inside. Joo-hyun starts fiddling around with the statue some more, and after a bit of probing, a secret compartment is revealed, from which a small pouch of the Walter White special drops to the ground. Joo-hyun can immediately tell what this is, and he figures out that this must mean the entire art gallery Park's sister owns must be a drug fencing operation, so he decides to give Jeonwoo a call. A little while later, Park's sister is in her office making a phone call to her boss to try and explain how she lost one of the drug samples, but all of a sudden, the police barge in with Park in handcuffs, and they are here to arrest her because they've already concluded that this is a drug operation. She attempts to bluff her way out of the situation by claiming the police have no evidence to link any drugs back to her, and she's banking on the fact that all her warehouses are locked with secure passwords, so there's no way the police would have been able to get in there to find the drugs. However, unfortunately for her, she failed to account for the fact that since Joo-hyun worked for her for a long time, he knows all the warehouse passcodes, so he was able to unlock them. And the police found a bunch of drugs hidden inside the art she had in storage, which is more than enough for them to put her behind bars for a long time. As a result of his help in bringing down the drug ring, Joo-hyun is given a reward of 10 million yen, and he is pretty happy about this. Since it covers the startup capital, he's going to need to begin his excavation endeavors, and he plans to begin working on it tomorrow. But as he is walking home, he is shocked to find out that his apartment is completely gone because a giant structure has emerged right on top of it. Joo-hyun isn't so worried about his stuff, but rather the fact that a tomb has already appeared in this country, and he wasn't expecting it to happen so soon. Meanwhile, down at the base of the tomb, a woman named Linda Walker from America has just arrived on the scene, and she is telling HQ that they got lucky with this one since it looks like the government of this country has yet to realize just how valuable tombs are, so it should be easy for them to claim the treasure for themselves. However, as she says this, she notices a man named Rui nearby, and the two seem to know each other because, just like Linda, Rui is part of the very few who know about tombs, and he doesn't plan on letting a chance like this slip through his fingers. Having people who know about tombs around makes Joo-hyun's plan several times harder than it already was, but he hears Linda mention that her group is bringing in explosives to try and bust their way in, and based on that, Ju Hyun can tell that people still haven't figured out how to deal with tombs properly yet, and Ju Hyun plans to take advantage of that to clear the tomb before they get a chance to spot him. Ju Hyun finds a section of tomb glyphs that he predicts will lead to the entrance, so he starts following them. Tomb glyphs are basically the language of the relics, and relics love to write about themselves a lot, so if you pay attention to what the glyphs say, you should be able to figure out exactly how to clear any tomb. Ju Hyun eventually finds the section that is meant to be the front entrance, so he takes out his knife and slashes the pillar to open up the tomb, and as he does so, the ground begins to shake and a blinding light erupts from the ground. Rui and Linda both see this happen, and they are both absolutely stunned since neither of them has ever seen something like this happen with a tomb before, but they aren't about to miss their opportunity to claim the artifact, so they both jump in without hesitation before the gate closes. Meanwhile, inside, Ju Hyun has already made his way into the main area of the tomb, and from the glyphs, he was able to figure out that this one is based on the story of the boy who dropped his axe in the river and was offered a gold and silver one instead, so he has a good idea of how he's meant to pass the trial. He begins by throwing his knife into the water, and as he does so, a giant snake emerges, asking who has lost yet another treasure in his lake. Ju Hyun calls its attention, and once the snake spots him, it begins the trial and opens its mouth to reveal two knives, asking Ju Hyun which of these is his. Ju Hyun knows that the trap of this test is that if he accepts either the gold or silver one knowing it isn't his, the snake is going to eat him, so he admits that neither of the blades are his, and the snake commends him for his honesty before pulling out Ju Hyun's real knife. According to the original legend, after he confirms that this really is his knife, the snake is supposed to reward him by granting him both the silver and gold weapons, but Ju Hyun doesn't want to do it that way, so instead of confirming that the knife is his, he grabs it and slashes the snake's mouth. The snake cries out in pain and demands to know what Ju Hyun thinks he's doing when he was just about to pass the trial, but Ju Hyun says he doesn't trust anything the relics say. After all, even if he did play along and pass the snake's trial the right way, he's pretty sure any reward the snake provides would have turned him into a deranged killer. The snake can't believe Ju Hyun actually knows about his secret curse, but Ju Hyun recalls that in his past life, the snake's relic was obtained by that American woman, and she ended up turning into a serial killer because of it, so he's not about to let that happen to him as well. Ju Hyun then proceeds to leap into the air and stab the snake right in the skull and orders it to just admit defeat and end this quickly. The snake refuses to give up and let Ju Hyun claim him, so Ju Hyun digs the knife in even deeper and tells it that it doesn't have a choice here. The snake begins thrashing around in pain and trying to shake Ju Hyun off, but Ju Hyun absolutely refuses to let go. There are two ways that a Tomb Raider can gain a relic, and that is either by having a high affinity and having the relic agree to join him, or by using dominance and basically beating the relic down until they are forced to obey your commands. Most raiders try to gain as much affinity as possible since it's the easiest way to get a relic on their side without a fight, but having learned about the true nature of relics in his past life, Ju Hyun has no intention of trying to get along with the relics at all. The snake keeps trying its hardest to get away from Ju Hyun, but it's no use, and before long, the snake loses the strength to fight back and is forced to submit to Ju Hyun, transforming into the gold and silver axe relic. Having successfully excavated this tomb, Ju Hyun now has 3 of his 4 Tomb Raider skills unlocked, so he only needs one more now, but he's not sure how to go about it, so he's about to start looking for information. But just then he gets a notification that he has just received the title of Abuser of Relics, and as a result, his dominance has gone up, but his affinity has also been reduced. Ju Hyun doesn't mind his affinity being reduced, but he hates the fact that he's being called an abuser, so he yells at the system for making him sound bad. Just then, Ju Hyun hears footsteps approaching, and he doesn't want to get spotted in here, so he immediately hides as Linda and Rui enter the boss room. Rui is excited and walks up to the lake before dropping a relic in the water so he can begin the trial. Linda asks what he's doing, so Rui explains that the prophet in his group told him that all he'd need to do is toss a relic in the lake to get things started, but nothing is happening right now. Linda is surprised to learn that Rui's group really has a prophecy relic, but just then, the entire cave begins to shake, and it looks like it's about to collapse. So Linda and Rui make a run for it, so they can escape before they get buried alive. Back in town, Park's goons are all in the office, panicking because they don't know what to do now that Park and his sister have been arrested. There's no way they can run the business by themselves, and they don't know how to make money any other way, so they start cursing Ju Hyun out for causing all this. However, just then, Kureha receives a call from Ju Hyun, and they all panic because they are scared of Ju Hyun after the beating he gave them last time. But they still answer anyway because they are also scared of what he might do to them if they don't answer his calls. but Ju Hyun immediately yells at them for taking so long to answer and threatens to beat them up over it. He tells them he has a little errand he wants them to run for him over at Midas, but when Korea hears the word Midas, he freaks out because he recalls that Midas is the world's largest auction house located in Las Vegas, and if Ju Hyun can get in there, then he should be able to find out what Taejun is up to right now. He asks them to go to this month's auction and look out for a man going by the alias Jack Kamen since he knows that was Taejun's alias, but Korea asks how they are supposed to get to such a high-class event, and Ju Hyun tells him he's going to have to figure it out on his own. Of course, Ju Hyun will pay them well for the job, so the expenses won't be an issue, and he's not really giving them a choice here since it's either they do as he says, or he beats them to death because he hasn't forgotten all the times they bullied him with Park. The next morning, Ju Hyun buys all the gear he's going to need for his next tomb raid, but as he is leaving the store, he ends up bumping into Rui. He is surprised to see him out here, but if Rui is around, then that must mean another tomb is about to appear, because Ju Hyun recalls that around this time, Rui's group had a prophecy artifact that could inform them of things like these in advance. He also notices that Rui himself seems to have an artifact, and he's not sure what it does, but he's going to steal it regardless. To create a distraction, Ju Hyun sprays his drink all over Rui, and while pretending to help him clean himself up, he pickpockets the artifact. And before Rui even had a chance to realize that something was wrong, the ground begins to shake as the tomb manifests, so Ju Hyun runs off, leaving Rui confused. But a moment later, he gets a call from HQ telling him that a new prophecy just came in, so they wanted to let him know that he needs to be careful because the same person who beat him to the previous tomb is nearby again. And as he hears that, Rui realizes that the person in question must have been Ju Hyun. This was the end of episode 2. Subscribe to not miss the next part.